Idubbbz released a video where you should watch my video on it, I think. He wants to grow as a person, which it seems to me that he certainly has, by the way. He feels bad about the negative outcomes of some of the earlier work that he did, and he's talking about how he's sorry and moving forward, and that he feels bad for the effects of those earlier, of the earlier content. It came across to me as a little bit, overly, like, I guess, like beating himself up a little bit more of it than I think was appropriate. I think he could have been a bit more confident and direct with how he said some stuff. A little self-flagellating, right? That's the right term. Thank you. I was trying to find that. Overall, though, like the sentiment behind the video, I fully agree with. The points that he made, I fully agree with. I just, you know, I want him to be confident. And right, so then Critical, the Moist Man, made a video on the Idubbbz video, which I was going to respond to because I had heard that his video, the Charlie's video, wasn't that great. I heard that it wasn't that good, that he was maybe dismissive of the points that Idubbbz had made in a bad way, that he was like, there was no problem here, you know, you're something. I don't know, I haven't seen it. But the problem is that now he's gone and released another video. The Content King has found a way to double the ad revenue from this, called Huge L Take. I'm guessing he's moving away from whatever points he made in this video. So I'm not going to watch both because A, that would take forever, and B, he's almost certainly going to cover what we need to know in this second video. I'm kind of curious what the development was. I mean, I came into this thinking I would be critical of him in this video, but now maybe I'll watch the second one and, you know, okay.
Hold on a second there, partner. Why don't you step into the saloon here for a little chit?
I guess for a quick summary, you can take a look at the comments under the first video. To be fair, this is the most sincere and genuine apology video on the entire platform. Here's D'Angelo Wallace, who's a phenomenal drama YouTuber. Almost choked on my words there. That's tough to say. I love D'Angelo, by the way, saying people at the time were literally citing Idubbbz as a source for why they were justified in using slurs. This made the internet a very disconcerting place. As someone who definitely did see the harm Ian was referring to firsthand, Ian is Idubbbz. I also think personal growth is pretty amazing. I appreciated his apology quite a bit, but that's just me. So it seems like here as well, people are going like, come on, man, there's some value to what Idubbbz is saying. So that's, yeah. So, okay, here's the follow-up video.
Well, now, hold on a second there, partner. Why don't you step into the saloon here for a little chit-chat? I've noticed we've got ourselves a little bit of a sour hootenanny on our hands here after my latest video
I'm always saying
on the Idubbbz situation. It's being hailed as a big L take from old Charles White here, and in the cyberspace, an L take is criminal, and the punishment for the crime is 1,000 different labels. So, there's a lot to talk about after the latest upload, so let's just go ahead and dive into it. I gave my opinion on the Idubbbz apology video, same thing every single person in the world with a keyboard has done over the last 24 hours, and this isn't shocking new content for me. I pretty much opine on everything everywhere that happens on the internet, even if it's like 30-year-old drama from an extinct MMO that I found on a subreddit last week. If I find it...
There's not much for me to say with regards to the lead-up that's being done here, of course.
Either entertaining or if I have a lot to say about it, I'll usually make a video on it just because I kind of treat my channel like a diary, so I vomit out my thoughts. And not everyone's going to agree with them, and people shouldn't agree with everything that I say, because everyone should be their own individual. For a long time now, I've said how dangerous I feel echo chambers are, so I've never wanted my channel to become one of those. And I don't think it has. I know people will disagree, but there's been plenty of instances over the years where I've said things that people disagree with. I think disagreeing with someone is extremely healthy and important. I wouldn't want a community that doesn't think for themselves and just blindly agrees with everything I say without giving it any thought of their own. And in this case, people have disagreed with my perspective on the Idubbbz situation. For those that don't know, I'll quickly break it down. Idubbbz made an apology video yesterday where he talked about how deeply he regrets the content he used to make and how he views it as being just horrible, and that he's very sorry for all of the things that he put out there in the world and the pain that he caused through the content. And that's become a very divisive topic. And I gave my perspective on it. And since then, people have done some very uncharitable interpretations of what I've been saying, and I guess I can't really blame them. If I'm not abundantly clear with where I stand on things, I've learned that everything gets lost with ambiguity, and people run with the absolute most negative narrative they can find, and the wildest ways to misconstrue some statements. So I actually can't even be.
I don't know how much of a lead up there's going to be. We're 2 minutes 20 in. You know, we'll see where we get to the point. This is something you have to go over a lot as a YouTuber, because it is something that people struggle with. But you know, because everyone opens, like YMS, Adam does this all the time as well. With the recent Mario movie especially, where there has to be like this giant prelude on the nature of disagreeing online. Yeah, but we'll see.
Mad about that. I recognize that's.
I just hope it's not him being evasive.
Shortcoming, and this is something that's happened in the past, where when I make a video, I know my intention. I know what I believe and where I stand. But you guys don't. You're not like a little ghost or a spirit over my shoulder that's watching me make a video or in my little noodle up here when I'm delivering my thoughts. Which means it's my responsibility to make my intentions known and clear. And I don't always fully convey it effectively. So I definitely think that's played some role here in how everything's been playing out with people talking about me on Twitch and on Reddit and Twitter, but not fully. There's definitely going to be some people that are going to look like Eustace from Courage the Cowardly Dog when he gets that gel that he puts in his hair that makes him really mad and his eyes pop out of his skull and his head explodes, because there are just going to be some things that I believe that other people aren't. And that's okay. But what I don't appreciate and what really gets my ass twisted is people labeling me horrible things on a complete misunderstanding of what I actually believe. Or them just making up things that I believe, or putting their whole ass in my mouth and filling it with words that I've never said or even came close to trying to express. So let's get into it. By far the biggest thing I'm seeing from the online discussion around my video is people saying that I was attacking Idubbbz for trying to grow, and that I wanted him to stay in that 2016 edgy era. And my take was that of a 30-year-old man with a 15-year-old's brain who still giggles and loves edgy humor from yesteryear. When nothing could be further from the truth. A, I'm not 30. I'm 28 years old, and shame on you, you disgusting swine, for insinuating that I'm pushing 30. I'm 28 years young. And B...
He's younger than me? Oh my god. That's a rough one. Alright.
It makes me feel like you didn't even bother watching the video, because I don't know how that could even come across at all. I'll quickly just play a small snippet from the end here, which I imagine a lot of people talking about this didn't even get to. So I really feel like throughout the video I made it clear that the edgy shit is lame and cringy, and that's something to absolutely regret. Now, obviously, times have changed, and he has changed. He's gotten older. He's in his 30s now. In your 30s, it's not exactly entertaining to just be spamming slurs for shock humor. I don't find that entertaining, and he doesn't either. So it's totally fine to want to distance yourself from making content like that, and that I was also supportive of him wanting to change and grow his content in a different direction. I still do respect that he didn't like what he was doing, so now he's doing something that he likes more. Even though it is coming at the risk of losing his audience, he'll find happiness in the content that he makes going forward, and maybe he's happier with the new audience that he potentially cultivates through all of it. So I had a whole section in the video about how important I find it that content creators branch out, instead of just living in a niche and staying locked down by their audience and their expectations, how they shouldn't just keep doing a song and dance that doesn't make them happy. They should be trying to grow and change as a person and as a content creator, and changing their content. I had a whole section about that, talking about it outside of even just the Idubbbz perspective here. So I don't really know how that one got so up here with this whole discussion around my video. The point of my video was never to attack the idea that...
Okay, the point in this video, 5 minutes 44 in, let's go.
Someone growing and regretting things they've done in their past is a bad thing. I really thought I made that clear, but I must have missed the mark, since so many people are saying that the whole core component of my video is to attack the fact that he's apologizing for personal growth and doing things that make him happy, which I never meant to convey, and if that's what came across, then I'm sorry that I missed the mark so drastically. I really feel like multiple times I called out that it's completely normal and fine to regret the shit you said in those videos and want to distance yourself from that content in general. Like, that makes a lot of sense, and I talked about him making different content that makes him happier and how that's great. Like, you should never feel like a prisoner to your audience to keep delivering something that doesn't make you happy. That was one of the broader talking points I used in that video, but people are acting like I never said that and that I wanted him to stay doing the same shit from 2016, which of course I was never arguing for.
What's the point?
Now, the next biggest thing by far is me saying that I don't think the apology was warranted. Maybe wasn't the right word, since that's the one a lot of people are really like underlining and highlighting and giving me an F on the book report for. So to explain what I meant, when I'm saying I don't think the apology was warranted, I'm saying I don't think him being a product of edgy internet culture is necessarily something that should have been weighing on his mind so heavily for the last 7 years, that he's lived with this constant guilt, this burden on his shoulders, where he's feeling as though he created edgy internet culture. The way he talked about it in this video really made me feel very bad for him, that he's had this kind of looming disgust at the man he used to be.
Okay, I agree with this. This makes me wonder that if I went back and I watched the original video, if it would be like what he's saying now, or if tonally it would be really different. I watched some of the original video. He's not wrong. So was he misconstrued to an extent? The original video is not good, IMO. I think I have to watch it. I feel like I'm not
I was an
making transformative content right now. Jesus.
Yesterday, Idubbbz posted a YouTube video that's become extremely divisive. I haven't seen people this divided on a singular. Once again, have to completely disagree with the way he looks at it. I feel like his perspective on it is very warped by the way the internet has evolved over the years. The way he talks about this content makes it sound like he used to f***ing murder puppies for these videos, which it was never that extreme. I very much would consider it edgy. It was 2016 edginess in all of its glory. That was entirely the brand. And for its time, it lived peacefully. You know, all four nations, water, earth, fire, air, lived together in harmony with all this edginess going on. Now, obviously, times have changed, and he has changed. He's gotten older. He's in his 30s now.
Okay, yeah, just seeing a small clip of this, I can definitely see how people would look at this and feel as though he is downplaying, like, the effect internet edgy culture had. Like, it was pretty bad for a while on YouTube. In the post-Gamergate era, more, but, like, even going back to like the new atheist era with like 2011 and prior and all the edgy content creators, you basically like, if you were any kind of minority on YouTube, there was like this overwhelmingly high chance that some like dipshit edgelord channel would make it their mission to get content off of making your life worse. Things have gotten a lot better in that respect, but I don't think a lot of people know how bad it was. The Gamergate era was the worst, man. Politically, there was like no space on YouTube for the left, or even liberals, or even like center-leaning people who had any kind of mildly progressive stance on any social issue, because they would instantly be dogpiled with 50,000 channels asking in bad faith, you know, why they're opposed to equality, because they support women more than men, because they think it's good this one woman got to do this one thing, or there was a woman in a movie or something. Yeah, I can definitely see how this comes across as being dismissive of that. Obviously, it could just be he didn't phrase it that well. And he is saying in the new video that if this many people aren't going along with what he's saying, that it might have been a negative reflection on the way in which he initially phrased things. I just wanted to know.
In your 30s, it's not exactly entertaining to just be spamming slurs for shock humor. I don't find that entertaining, and he doesn't either. So it's totally fine to want to distance yourself from making content like that. But I don't think it was a mistake that he made those videos. Like, they're not hurtful, nor do I really think they're damaging. Now, you can make...
Okay, yeah, I can see the issue that people took with this. Oh, all right. I'm not watching 21 minutes of that. Let's finish the new one.
Because he partook in edgy internet culture, which wasn't just him. His channel wasn't the genesis of edginess. He didn't create it. He was molded by it, like Bane from Batman. And I feel as though the content he used to make did have a message. He wasn't coming from a place of genuine hatefulness. I don't think he was ever like a real racist or an actual bigot. So when I said I don't think the apologies warranted, what I mean is I don't think what he did was so damaging and scarring to the online space or individuals that for 7 years he's needed to carry this guilt where he felt obligated to finally apologize for it. If people really thought he held these racist, bigoted beliefs, I don't think many people would have been signing up for Creator Clash 1 and 2, right? Like, this is the first time he's publicly acknowledged it and fully apologized for it. He's, of course, talked about distancing himself from it on podcasts, but this is the first time he's really owned up to it publicly. But I think...
I do agree that I think you would have to have a misread of the situation to believe that Idubbbz is a bigot. I've always been... You can attest to this, right? For as long as this channel has been... you know, as long as I've even talked about Idubbbz or mentioned him, I've made it clear. I think it's pretty obvious that he's one of the rare cases where edginess really wasn't a cover for reactionary politics. That's not to say that it couldn't have been harmful. Only, like, you can go back and watch his old stuff from 2016 right now if you want, or any of that, or maybe you'd have to find a re-upload. And there might be some off-color stuff, you know, like some stuff that's, like, pretty problematic. But I think it's pretty clear that he's not doing it for the sake of the problematic content, you know?
Most people knew he wasn't, like, this evil, racist person. So what I was saying is I just don't think what he did gave a ton of people the impression that he really was a horrible, racist, bigoted person. Now, I used the word obligated to apologize just a moment ago. And that's what I went into.
I've never seen Idubbbz stuff. Maybe playing one of the worst videos. I'm pretty sure if I played one of his worst videos, my channel would get a strike. So probably not, no. You might have to watch that on your own time. The N-word is pretty bad. Listen, I'm not litigating on, like, the harm that his content has done. I'm talking about his personal position. Like, whether or not he is ideologically bigoted. Whether or not he believes things that are bigoted. And you know, I might get flack for this, but it's the same position that I've made before. Even in the N-word stuff, not the vibe I got. Came across like he was being edgy, and you can argue saying the N-word is racist, but ideologically, I don't think it betrayed an eternal belief in his head that he was trying to, like, find a sneaky get-around way of being bigoted. And, you know, maybe you do, maybe you don't, you can go watch if you want, but that's my opinion.
To the video thinking the motivation was, like, you know, after all this time, people pointing out, like, the use of slurs in those videos have made them age horribly, you know, this isn't acceptable, you know, it's time you own up to your past sins. That's what I thought it was. But after listening to what people have said since I posted my video and diving a bit more into, like, the actual discussion in general online, I failed to really understand that maybe Idubbbz also treated this video like a diary where he just wanted to get everything off his chest with how he feels about it.
It did feel like a very personal video. Like, it did. As somebody who heavily criticized it, I think on the grounds of optics and like how convincing it was to the people it maybe should have reached, it definitely felt like it was constructed for him.
So I completely misunderstood what the motivation could have been for this video, and for that I'm sorry. The goal wasn't to attack the whole idea of an apology for content you regret. That was never my intention. So if this is truly like a very personal thing where he wants to just finally move on from this, and in order to do that he wanted to make this video publicly addressing how he feels about all of it, then that's totally understandable. That's absolutely understandable. And I may have had like the wrong lens of viewing the video in the first place, since I may have got the wrong idea about what was even driving the video to begin with. But now I do want to explain, I still do believe that Idubbbz was never a bad person for the content cops he made. That edgy shock humor was very much a 2016 trend. That whole era with slurs being used willy-nilly for cheap shock humor was not uncommon on the internet. And I don't know why people think that I'm trying to harken back to the glory days of being able to use a bunch of slurs all over the place. I've never said that. I think in the last video, what gave people that idea is I said 2016 era shock humor in all its glory, so they thought that I was trying to celebrate the golden days or something. But I've never ever spoken support for that kind of edgy shit. I've always openly made fun of that whole idea. Even back in the era, I always found it pretty lame for the most part. So that might have just been a misunderstanding of my sarcasm when saying in all its glory in the last video, but I want to make that clear.
Well, I think that's the part of the video that we saw, even in my brief, like, 10-second look at the 21-minute original video. And it did definitely come across like he was like, yeah, those were the glory days a little bit in that tiny segment. Man, things back then sucked.
But anyway, him using these slurs for cheap shock humor in the content cops is embarrassing and something to genuinely regret and look back on like, damn, I fucked that up. Absolutely. And I said that in the last video too. They were videos that were meant to criticize people that did deserve criticism. One thing Idubbbz said in his video that I still very much disagree with is that he made videos criticizing people based on lackluster reasons. I very much vehemently disagree with that. The people he did make content on were worthy of being criticized and called out for bad actions and being highlighted for horrible things they've done. And in doing so, Idubbbz attempted to entertain his audience, and one of the ways he tried to entertain them was through this shock humor with his slurs. Like I said, his catchphrase being two slurs strung together is nothing to be proud of. So look,
it's N-word F slur for anyone who's... I know this sounds kind of quaint by today's standards, but that was... Yeah, okay.
Looking back on that component of content cops negatively and regretting that is a completely understandable and normal thing to do. Now, he did mention something that I also disagreed with initially, but after reading more, maybe I'm just too naive to really have a full grasp on it. I said that I don't think that content is indoctrinating, meaning I don't think him making those videos with the shock humor would lead to people thinking that all of a sudden it's okay to start using a ton of slurs.
So that I fully disagree with. There are 100% lots of people, like stadiums full, multiple dozens of stadiums. Honestly, with the reach we're talking about, like maybe hundreds, like it's a lot of people, where you have to understand, look, Idubbbz is a really smart guy, okay? The stuff that he uses to make his jokes, the way he structures things, I know he's got a lot going on up here, but a lot of the people who watch those videos were literally like 12 or 13 years old. I'm not even going to talk about people who are already reactionary, or who are just stupid, or who are like bigoted in a way where they're looking for a way to justify through like humor, or people who will see him, Idubbbz, as kind of like a covert recruiter for reactionary politics by normalizing the use of those words. Ignoring all of that, a lot of the people watching those videos, maybe even a majority, were kids. This is the problem with like Leafy too, somebody who's like actually really bad on pretty much every level, terrible. But like when you take an already of a premise vulnerable for people taking bad lessons from it, and then your audience is overwhelmingly kids, they are so much more likely to take the wrong lessons. Because, okay, Idubbbz says the N-word, okay? And Idubbbz's head, he's like, well, I'm not racist. I'm using it contextually for comedy. Like, you should be able to understand that. But then a lot of kids watch that, and they hear people criticizing Idubbbz for saying the N-word, and they go, what? No, there's no big deal with the N-word. And now all of a sudden, the people online concerned about racism are the enemy, and the people online who are weirdly okay with saying the N-word are like the cool guys fighting for freedom, yeah, sticking it up to the man. And where does that lead? Well, we all saw how Gamergate went, where basically every channel associated with Gamergate is now either deplatformed because they couldn't stop saying Nazi shit, or is currently saying Nazi shit. Like, overwhelmingly, there was this huge move to the far right for that group because they made it an ideology to oppose censorship in the form of people suggesting you please not be overt bigots. This kind of stuff, it takes a lot of care and nuance to deliver the appropriate attitude to the audience. I've faced criticism for being edgy, though I'm nowhere near as edgy as 2016 Idubbbz, admittedly. And in my defense, considering the fact that I'm a live streamer, which means that I put content out nonstop, which means I can keep clarifying, keep addressing, keep adding nuance. These aren't like edited videos, like people see a lot of me when they watch me. And two, I explicitly talk about progressive politics. I feel like I have the opportunity to do a good job contextualizing the stuff that I do, the stuff that I say. So I'm comfortable with where I am. Idubbbz 2016 was not engaging in anywhere near an acceptable level of like responsible cultivation, Not even remotely. Yes, people have made that criticism Tequila Sunset. And while I disagree in many cases, I still welcome the criticism.
In the real world or around people or in general, right? I didn't think that. But I also failed to recognize that in 2016, I was still in my 20s, which is sad to think that I'm basically a fossil now. I wasn't a child.
You're still
during
in your
this
20s.
period, so I don't know what effect this might have had on younger viewers of his.
Huh?
Maybe I'm very wrong in that it did serve as like a gateway drug into racism or something. That is possible. I don't know. And that's what a lot of people did point out that I think is a great point. I was already old enough to recognize that he was never advocating for legitimate racism or bigotry or anything like that. That was never his message. But younger people may not have picked up on that. So I do believe it is possible that he did have a very negative effect on how a lot of the youth perceived slurs and maybe the willingness to use them. That is possible. And I'm sorry that I didn't consider that angle.
It's kind of like the South Park phenomena, where I can watch South Park, and even though it's not really my favorite show, I can watch it and enjoy a lot of episodes and appreciate the jokes, and a lot of them are very well written, well structured. Like, I'm certainly not going to say it's a lazy show, though it does promote laziness as an ideology, kind of. But especially if you're young or like not sort of, if you haven't been exposed to the right bits of political education, you can come away from South Park with the impression that the least cool thing that you can do is to care about something. Because the primary format of South Park, not always, but pretty often, is that you'll have like an insane, hyperbolic representative of some issue or ideology, which the kids will like notice and criticize or whatever. But then there will be an opposite side that emerges, the fat kid will invariably fully side with one side or the other, but both sides are like really dumb and bad, So the real answer at the end is like rejecting both and being in the center, because people who care about stuff, people who have radical ideas are busybody ideologues who don't actually care about anything outside their personal pet issues, and the best thing you can do is to ignore them. Busybodies, etc., etc. I mean, they've done episodes like mocking Al Gore for climate change stuff, right? So I'm not saying everyone who watches South Park becomes some kind of enlightened centrist libertarian, but a lot of them did, especially people raised on South Park, which is a lot of people because South Park's been running for like, 20 seasons? It's a lot of people.
Failed to realize that I was still pretty old when the content cops were, hitting the cyberspace. So obviously, if you inadvertently became a lightning rod,
they walk back the Al Gore stuff pretty hard. Yeah, but they did a lot of stuff like that,
for real racists, that's horrible. Now, I do still believe that his content cop series was not a cruel series. Like I said, the whole message behind it was pointing out some horrible things that people had done, and you delivered a message of here's why that shit's bad. And you coded your message with things meant to entertain, but in doing so, you delivered some bad shit along the way with the edgy shock slurs that were thrown in so loosey-goosey throughout the content. But I don't think that changes the actual message of what the video meant to convey. And it was never a message of cruelty. It was always a message of, these people are doing bad, and these are people in very influential positions who probably shouldn't be. I don't think that is a bad message. I don't think there's anything cruel about what you were aiming to do. Another thing that always comes up in situations like this is them saying, you cut out important details on purpose, maliciously leaving out information that's crucial. And I always hate that. Like, I'm not just gonna play the entire video and go through each and everything. I just played the ones that I really wanted to focus on for the general point that I was trying to get across, which was A, growing and changing your content is always a good thing, and it makes complete sense why Idubbbz would regret the edginess from those videos and would regret some of the big components of those videos. Like, I don't understand how all of that got so mixed up. Like, yes, I do disagree that the content was cruel, as I just explained, but the core message is still, changing is a good thing, always has been, and I've always preached for that. Instead of just living in a niche forever and making yourself miserable doing the same thing forever, changing, growing as a person, and adapting is always great. And he had legitimate things to be regretful of. The edginess, the shock humor, inexcusably cringe, lame, not good. The remaining parts of his apology video were topics that I totally understood his perspective of. I totally got it. But none of them were what I was focusing on for what I was saying about the whole subject. For example, he mentions fan interaction where he met a couple fans and it helped him understand that, damn, my content is really giving people a certain vibe or a certain impression of me that just isn't true. So it helped, like, show him that there were a lot of things in the content that were regrettable, that he regretted. Like, I get that. Like, I totally understand it. And I didn't exclude them from my video as a way of, like, manipulating.
This video was very fucking padded. I'm happy that if the central concern here is whether or not harm was done in early Idubbbz videos, and initially he thought there wasn't, and now he's going, well, okay, I think maybe there was, because I didn't think about it like this. That's good. I think pretty highly of MoistCr1TiKaL, to be honest. You know, I like him to be on the right side of stuff.
A narrative or trying to hide it or anything. They were just things I totally understood, but they weren't part of, like, the overall talking point that I was trying to discuss. In the last video, I mentioned that I didn't feel his...
At the end of the day, Charlie and Idubbbz are both hot, really, so what's the issue? That's so true. It's honestly kind of crazy. It's really... I would honestly say that Charlie and Idubbbz are maybe two of the hottest large YouTube guys, like, period. Markiplier is always going to be on top for me, because I love that guy, but, like, man.
Content created the weirdo losers that disregarded the message of the content and instead focused on just the slurs, right? Like a bunch...
This happens a lot. It really does. It's a lot of people are very, very, very naive when it comes to how much faith they have in their audience to take the good bits of their message, you know?
Of, like, actual bad actors who were just there to celebrate the fact that Idubbbz would say the bad words, the real off-limits stuff, the slurs. That's all they cared about. I said I have no doubt that those community members exist, but I didn't think his content created them. You know, I felt like, you know, like bacteria, they just happened to already be there and then found his content and then found a home there to keep celebrating that shit. But just like I mentioned a little while ago, I'm most likely wrong about this. I saw the content when I was in my 20s. I could see the satire in it. I assume the majority of other people could, but I didn't even take into consideration that a lot of the viewers...
Another good example of this that I can think of. So I think I have a very, like, good control over my audience. So, with the exception of maybe, like, too many liberals sneak in sometimes, and then we have, like, the liberal Canada thing. But I think a good example here would be something, cite him if he's got the point, Destiny said, where he, because as you all know, Destiny is a triple Nazi, right? He studied from me, then from Hitler, and then he improved in the formula, if you go with that. And when he used to argue more fervently, I guess he's doing, like, the red pill circuit right now, but when he used to argue with the alt-righters, he had a lot of, like, communists in his audience because he was one of the premier debate guys. He was the premier debate guy arguing against the alt-right. So he had a lot of communist followers who weren't taking the real central point of his message, which was that you should be able to shoot people for stealing your sandwich outside of a cafe. And then he had, like, a big falling out with the communists in his audience because they had only taken portions of his ideology rather than the entirety of it, which was the aforementioned sandwich stealing shooting. And then likewise, you know, whenever he criticizes a person on the left, a bunch of Nazis sneak into his community and they're like, ooh, yes, own them, you know. So it's the audiences are they're not very reliable. You have to be, yeah, they're fluid. They're retarded. That's the word. I use that word so rarely. It didn't really come to the top of my mind. Yeah, they're retarded. You have to be very careful with them. It's your responsibility as a person who cultivates an audience to make sure they don't take a bunch of bad ideas into their heads From what you've said, I think.
Were younger, and there's a very good chance that this content was their first exposure to it, and it may have led to them becoming those weirdo losers. Not necessarily that the weirdo losers had always existed since the beginning of time and then just found his content. There is a very high likelihood that it also just created that atmosphere with those kind of audience members as well.
Explain tweeting this in the middle of this segment. That's not me. I didn't tweet that. I didn't do that. That's not me.
Which is something Idubbbz would obviously want to distance himself from. I think that was most of the things people were talking about in relation to my video on the subject, so hopefully I cleared up any misconceptions about where I stand or what I believe. And I'm sorry if things got real lost somehow. I want to make it clear once again, I was never attacking Idubbbz for apologizing for regretting his content or for wanting to change and grow and do different things. I really thought I voiced support for those things, but I must not have done it effectively. So that's on me, and hopefully this gave all of my perspectives on it much more clarity. That's about it. So yeah.
All right. Well, okay. This will probably make people a lot happier. The like to dislike ratio seems to indicate that. So, okay. I really do hope that Idubbbz finds comfort and peace in the kinds of content that he wants to make and doesn't feel forever haunted by ghosts and held by chains to, you know, mistakes that he's made in the past. Like I said on Twitter, you know, self-improvement, introspection is always a painful process, you know? But it doesn't have to be a sad one. It can be a joyful or triumphant one. And I think, you know, I think that's something we should all strive for.